He wasn't asleep. Charles Montgomery lay perfectly still on his study couch, eyes closed, breathing steady, listening to every word. His housekeeper, Rosemary Simon, didn't know he was there. Neither did her 7-year-old daughter, Grace. And what Charles was about to hear would shatter everything he thought he understood about the woman who'd been cleaning his mansion for the past 6 months. The little girl's voice came soft through the doorway, and then the words that made his chest tighten. Words no wealthy man expects to hear when he's testing the character of the people who work for him. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you're new here, click subscribe so you never miss upcoming videos. Charles Montgomery built his fortune the way most self-made billionaires do, through relentless focus, calculated risks, and an almost pathological distrust of people's motives. At 62, he'd survived 3 failed marriages, countless betrayals by business partners, and more lawsuits than he cared to remember. His mansion in Connecticut overlooked Long Island Sound, 14,000 square feet of marble and glass that felt more like a museum than a home. He lived alone except for his staff, people he paid well but kept at a careful distance. Trust, he'd learned over the decades, was a luxury he couldn't afford. So when his previous housekeeper retired and Anderson Wilcox, his estate manager for 15 years, recommended Rosemary Simon for the position, Charles did what he always did. He investigated. Background check, credit report, social media history, employment records going back 20 years. What he found was exactly what he expected to find. A woman who'd worked hard her entire life and had almost nothing to show for it. Rosemary was 41, a single mother whose husband had died in a construction accident 8 years earlier, leaving her with a 7-year-old daughter and $15,000 in medical debt. She'd worked as a housekeeper, a hotel maid, a nursing home attendant. She'd been evicted twice. Her car had been repossessed. Her daughter Grace had been diagnosed with a mild learning disability that required special tutoring Rosemary could barely afford. In other words, she was desperate. And desperate people, in Charles' experience, did desperate things. They stole, they lied, they took what they felt they were owed. Still, Anderson vouched for her, and Anderson had never steered him wrong. So Charles hired her on a trial basis, with one condition that he didn't tell her about. He would be watching, always watching. For the first 2 months, Rosemary worked like someone terrified of losing her job. She arrived at 6 in the morning, never took breaks longer than 15 minutes, and cleaned with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. She spoke only when spoken to, kept her eyes down, and never asked for anything beyond her wages. Charles observed all of this through the security cameras installed throughout his home, footage he reviewed each evening in his study. He watched her scrub floors that were already spotless, polish silver that rarely got used, organize closets that didn't need organizing. He watched her eat her lunch alone in the staff lounge, usually just a sandwich she'd brought from home, scrolling through her phone with the exhausted expression of someone who'd given up hoping for better news. He watched her on the phone with her daughter's school, voice tight with worry as she discussed Grace's progress, or lack thereof. And he waited for the moment when she would slip, when she would pocket something small, when she would cut corners, when she would reveal what he believed every person ultimately revealed, that their integrity had a price. But that moment never came. Instead, something else happened. Rosemary asked if she could bring Grace to work during summer break. "She's out of school and I can't afford the day program," Rosemary explained, standing in the doorway of Charles's study with her hands clasped in front of her like a penitent. "She won't be any trouble, Mr. Montgomery. She'll stay in the staff lounge. She has books. She's very quiet." Charles studied her for a long moment. This was a test in itself. Desperate people made requests. Comfortable people kept boundaries. 1-week trial. If she causes any disruption, the arrangement ends." "Thank you," Rosemary whispered. "Thank you so much." Grace arrived the next Monday, a small girl with her mother's dark eyes and a nervousness that made her seem even younger than 7. She carried a backpack stuffed with books and coloring supplies, and she sat in the staff lounge with the stillness of a child who'd been warned repeatedly not to make noise. Charles watched them through the cameras, mother and daughter navigating their day with a careful choreography of check-ins and quiet reassurances. And then 3 days into this new arrangement, Charles decided to conduct a different kind of test. He positioned himself on the leather couch in his study, a room Rosemary was scheduled to clean that afternoon. He left a $50 bill on his desk, half hidden under a stack of papers. Then he lay down, closed his eyes, and slowed his breathing to mimic sleep. He'd done this before with other employees. It was a simple test. People revealed their true nature when they thought no one was watching. Through his barely opened eyelids, he saw Rosemary enter the room, Grace trailing behind her. "Mama, is he sleeping?" "Shh, yes, we need to be very quiet." Charles kept his breathing steady as Rosemary began to clean, the soft sound of her movements filling the room. Grace settled on the floor near the doorway with a coloring book. The scratch of crayons on paper was the only other sound. Minutes passed. Charles waited for Rosemary to approach the desk, waited for her to notice the money, waited for the moment when temptation would override caution. And then Grace spoke. "Mama, why does he have so many books if nobody reads them?" Her voice was curious, not judgmental, a child's observation. "Because some people collect things, sweetheart. Now please, keep coloring." "Do you think he's lonely?" Charles felt his chest tighten at the question, so unexpected it almost made him open his eyes. "Grace, that's not appropriate. But he lives in this big house all by himself. Doesn't he miss having people?" Rosemary's voice softened. "I'm sure he's very busy, honey. Important men like Mr. Montgomery don't have time to be lonely." "That's sad," Grace said simply. "Everybody should have somebody." There was a pause. Charles could hear Rosemary moving closer to where her daughter sat. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper, as if she were sharing a secret she thought no one else would hear. "You know what I think about sometimes, Gracie? I think about how we barely have anything, and we're always worried about money and rent and whether we'll have enough for groceries. But at the end of the day, when we're in our little apartment and you're doing your homework at the kitchen table and I'm making dinner, even if it's just spaghetti again, I look at you and I think we're the richest people in the world." Grace giggled softly. "We're not rich, Mama. We don't even have a car anymore." "Rich doesn't always mean having money, baby. Sometimes rich means having someone you love who loves you back. It means having a reason to wake up in the morning. Mr. Montgomery has all this." She gestured around the study, at the first edition books, the original artwork, the furniture that costs more than most people's annual salary. "But I don't know if he has anyone who makes him feel the way you make me feel." "How do you make me feel?" "Like the luckiest person alive." Charles lay motionless, his eyes still closed, but his throat had tightened so much he could barely breathe. No one was supposed to hear this conversation. Rosemary thought he was asleep. She had no reason to perform, no motive to impress. This was real. This was who she was when she thought no one important was listening. Grace was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that hit Charles like a physical blow. "When I grow up, I want to be rich like we are, not like Mr. Montgomery." Rosemary's breath caught. Charles heard it even through his careful performance of sleep. "Oh, baby. Can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "Sometimes I pretend Mr. Montgomery is my grandpa. Not a real one because I know Daddy's parents are in heaven and your mama lives far away, but like a pretend grandpa, because he seems so sad all the time,
And I think maybe if someone loved him like I love you, he wouldn't be sad anymore." Charles felt something crack in his chest, something he'd spent decades building, a wall between himself and the kind of vulnerability that left you open to being hurt. He'd constructed that wall brick by brick, betrayal by betrayal, disappointment by disappointment, and this 7-year-old girl who thought he couldn't hear her had just demolished it with a few honest words. Rosemary's voice was thick with emotion. "You have the kindest heart, Grace. Don't ever let the world take that away from you." Did the world take it away from Mr. Montgomery? The question hung in the air like smoke. Rosemary didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was soft, almost sad. "I think maybe it did, sweetheart. I think maybe he forgot what really